During what seemed like a normal dinner, I lied and said I'd just been fired to test my wife. And in that exact moment, she quietly turned away and whispered something that made my blood run cold. If you want to hear how that single sentence exposed everything I didn't want to admit about my marriage, stay with me. And if you enjoy real-life stories like this, raw, honest, and painfully relatable, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Dinner moved along the way it always did, without ceremony. Food on the table, a short exchange about school, a few comments about traffic and gas prices. Nothing worth remembering on its own. I took my seat like I had every night for years, loosening my tie, rolling my shoulders once, settling into work had been long. Not dramatic, just draining. Meetings stacked on meetings, problems handed down because someone trusted I'd handle them quietly. That trust had followed me my whole career. Reliable. I listened while my kid talked, nodded at the right moments, asked follow-up questions. That part mattered to me, always had. Even when my mind felt stretched thin, I stayed present there. Responsibility didn't end when the kids across the table. My wife barely looked up. Her phone stayed in her hand, thumb moving in practiced motions. She laughed once at something on the screen, a quick sound that, "You're late," she said, without accusation, without concern. Ran behind, I. That answer required no effort. It filled space and kept things smooth. Explaining myself would have taken more energy than it. Plates shifted. Silverware clinked. Conversation thinned. A silence settled that felt familiar enough not to question. I'd learned a long time ago not to interpret every quiet moment as distance. Life was heavy. People carried stress in different work. Still, something sat off to the side of my attention. A series of small moments I'd brushed past over the last few months. Decisions made without me. Comments framed as jokes that landed a little too sharp. Questions about money I told myself it was temporary. Pressure. Fatigue. Everyone goes She finally looked up. Ho. Not curiosity. Accounting. Busy, I said. Same as you. That seemed to satisfy the requirement. Her gaze drifted back to the screen. The topic closed. I got fired today. The sentence came. Her. Oh, that was it. No question. T. Not great. My kid looked up, eyes wide. What? Those words had always worked before. They still did. The kid nodded, though uncertainty lingered. I kept my tone light, redirected the conversation, helped them finish eating. Parenthood didn't allow room for spirals. She stood and cleared her plate, already disengaged. We'll talk later, she said, heading toward the W. Fra. I know. No, I'm not upset, just thinking ahead. A pause. If he's really out, we can't ignore that. I need to protect myself. And the kid. Another pause. Shorter this time. I'll call tomorrow. We should be prepared. The words landed without drama. No malice, no anger. Just logistics. Planning. Something tightened in my chest. Not sharp enough to be pain. More like recognition. The kind that comes when a truth you've avoided finally stands still long enough to see clearly. She walked back into the kitchen a minute later, keys already in hand. Running out, she said. I nodded, didn't ask where. The door closed. The house adjusted around the absence. I stood there longer than necessary, towel draped over my shoulder, staring at the counter. Thoughts didn't race. They lined up, one after another, calm, heavy. For years, silence had felt like maturity, like restraint, like choosing peace over ego. I'd believed that absorbing discomfort kept things intact. Standing alone in that kitchen, it occurred to me that silence had done something else entirely. It had taught people what I would tolerate. I turned off the faucet, dried my hands, and checked the time. Homework still needed reviewing. A lunch had to be packed. Life didn't pause just because something shifted under the surface. I walked down the hall toward my kid's room, already replaying that whispered phone call in my head, measuring it against every moment I dismissed as nothing. Morning didn't announce anything new. Coffee brewed, shoes waited by the door. My kid moved through the house half awake, asking where their backpack was. I answered, signed a permission slip, tied a loose shoelace. The routine held, even though something underneath it had shifted. She didn't come back that night. A text arrived just after midnight. Staying at my sister's. We'll talk later. No explanation, no question, just information. I read it once, set the phone down, and went to sleep anyway. There was work in the morning. Whatever was unfolding didn't excuse me from showing up. At the office, everything looked the same. Same building, same badge scan. Same nods from people who expected consistency from me. I took my seat, opened my laptop, and started on the day's priorities. Numbers made sense. Systems followed rules. That familiarity steadied me. Still, conversations shifted in small ways. A colleague paused before asking me to review something, as if reconsidering whether I was still the right person. Another mentioned budget tightening, glanced at me, then changed the subject. No one said anything directly. They didn't have to. During lunch, my phone buzzed, a message from her mother. Just checking in. Everything okay with work? I stared at the screen longer than necessary. That question hadn't come from nowhere. I replied with something neutral. All good. Busy as usual. A thumbs up came back. Nothing else. By mid-afternoon, a call came from her brother. We rarely spoke unless something needed fixing. "Hey man," he said, "just wanted to make sure you're holding things together over there." Hold things together. Not how are you? I'm fine, I said. What's going on? He hesitated. Nothing, just, times are tough. After the call ended, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. The pattern had become clear. Information had moved ahead of me. A version of my situation was circulating without my input. I kept working. That was the only thing that still felt fully under my control. Later that day, an old colleague reached out. Marcus and I had worked together years ago before he moved into consulting. We met for coffee near the office, the kind of place people stopped at between meetings. "You look tired," he said, studying me longer than politeness required. "Long week," I replied. He nodded, then said something that cut through the noise. "Be careful who you stay quiet for." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Marcus stirred his drink, eyes focused on the cup. "I've seen this before. People confuse silence with consent. They start making decisions for you because you didn't say no fast enough." I didn't answer right away. "It's not always worth correcting every rumor," I said. "True," he replied, "but some rumors grow legs, and once they start walking, they don't need you anymore." We talked about work after that, about contracts, about companies downsizing the wrong departments, normal things. Still, his words stayed with me. That evening, I picked up my kid from after-school care. A teacher mentioned an upcoming fee for a trip, asked whether payment should go through me or their mother. The question seemed simple, but it carried weight. I answered without hesitation. "Send it to me." At home, the house felt larger than usual. I reheated leftovers, reviewed homework, signed another form. Between tasks, messages came in. An aunt asking if everything was stable. A cousin offering support if needed. Each one carried the same underlying assumption. Something had changed, and I was expected to absorb it quietly. Later, after my kid went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop closed. No emails, no spreadsheets, just my phone and the realization that my absence from the conversation had created one without me. Marcus's voice echoed back. "Silence with no boundaries doesn't protect you, it replaces you." I reached for my phone again, scrolled through the day's messages, and started drafting a note I didn't send yet, weighing each word against the cost of staying quiet a little longer. The first time I heard it, it came sideways. A comment dropped into a conversation that wasn't meant for me. I was walking past the conference room when two voices lowered without fully stopping. "He's always been private about money," one of them said. "Private or secretive?" the other replied. They laughed quietly, not cruelly, the kind of laugh people use when they think they're being reasonable. I kept walking, didn't slow down, didn't turn my head. That word stayed with me longer than it should have. Secretive. It carried weight because it sounded close enough to truth to stick. I had always handled finances alone, paid the bills, managed savings, made sure nothing bounced. That wasn't deception, that was responsibility. Still, doubt works differently. It doesn't argue, it suggests. Later that day, my phone buzzed with a message from her. "Can you send me the account balances?" No greeting, no context. "Which ones?" I typed back. Minutes passed before the reply came. All of them. I stared at the screen. That request would have been normal once. Now it felt like a test I hadn't agreed to take. "We can go over it together tonight," I wrote. "Just send them," she replied. I didn't respond right away. At home, she wasn't there. A note on the counter said she'd taken our kid to her mother's for dinner. No mention of when they'd be back. I reheated food for one, ate standing up, and checked my email. A notification caught my attention. A bank alert confirming a change to a joint account. Spending limits adjusted. Access permissions modified. I hadn't authorized any of it. I logged in, reviewed the details, then closed the browser without making changes. Instead, I opened a new folder on my computer, labeled it with the date, started saving copies of statements, transaction histories, correspondence. Not out of spite, out of clarity. That night, when they returned, conversation stayed shallow. She talked about traffic, about her mother's health, about a school fundraiser she'd already agreed to support. "I told them you'd handle the payment," she said, almost casually. I nodded, no argument. But something inside me noted the shift. Decisions were being made around me, not with me. Days passed like that. Small exclusions. Missed calls returned late or not at all. Questions answered with half sentences. "We'll deal with it later," she'd say. There's no need to get into details. Details used to matter. Now they were treated like inconveniences. I started noticing patterns. Conversations that ended when I entered the room. Phone calls taken outside. Emails forwarded without explanation. One afternoon I picked up our kid early. At the front desk, the administrator asked me to update emergency contact information. Apparently, changes had already been submitted. "Your wife requested it," she said. "Just need your confirmation." I signed, then asked to see the form. My name had been moved down the list. That night, I sat in the car longer than necessary before going inside. Not avoiding the house, just needing a minute to think without interruption. Was I missing something obvious? Had my way of handling things crossed into control without me realizing it? The question felt uncomfortable because it wasn't absurd. I replayed years of decisions, times I'd said, "I've got it," instead of asking for input. Moments when efficiency had mattered more than explanation. Maybe that silence had planted this version of me in other people's minds. Inside, she was on the phone again. I heard my name once, then the phrase, "He doesn't tell me everything." I walked past the doorway without stopping. Back in the bedroom, I opened my laptop and continued organizing files. Not obsessively, methodically, a habit I trusted. I also started cutting back. Fewer shared accounts, fewer automatic transfers. Conversations kept strictly to what needed to be said. The house still functioned. Meals happened. Schedules held. From the outside, nothing looked broken. But the rhythm was off, like furniture shifted just enough to trip over in the dark. Before bed, I checked my phone one last time. No new messages. I set it face down on the nightstand and turned off the lamp, already aware that the space between what was said and what was done had grown wide enough to fall through. She chose a Sunday afternoon. Family already gathered. No escape without looking guilty. Her mother's living room felt crowded in a way it never used to. Chairs pulled closer than necessary, voices overlapping. Someone handed me a drink I didn't want. I took it anyway and set it down untouched. Conversation drifted the way it always did at first. Church, neighborhood news, a cousin's promotion. Then she cleared her throat. "There's something we need to talk about," she said. Every head turned, not toward me, toward her. "We've been under a lot of pressure lately," she continued, "financially, emotionally." She didn't look at me when she said it. "I just think it's fair to ask some questions out loud." Her sister nodded before a question was even asked. "About what?" her mother said. She finally turned to me. "About whether we're actually stable. About whether everything has been handled honestly." The word landed cleanly, honestly. I felt the familiar instinct rise, to explain, to contextualize, to soften the moment so everyone stayed comfortable. Instead, I kept my voice level. "What do you want to know?" She didn't hesitate. "Do we have debts I don't know about?" No build-up, no transition. "No," I said. "Are there accounts you control that I don't have access to?" "Yes." A murmur rippled through the room. "I manage them for efficiency," I added. "Nothing is hidden." She tilted her head slightly, like she was listening carefully. "That's your version." Her brother leaned forward. "Man, transparency matters in a marriage." "I agree," I said, "which is why I've never refused a conversation." She smiled faintly. But you refuse information unless you decide it's necessary. I let that sit. Arguing definitions wouldn't help. All bills are paid, I said. Savings are intact. There's no risk to the household. Her mother crossed her arms. That's not the same as trust. I nodded once. Trust goes both ways. The room went quiet. Not uncomfortable, expectant. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. That's why I've already taken steps to protect myself. She tapped the screen, then slid it across the table toward her mother. Joint account access has been adjusted. Spending limits too. I looked at the screen. Already knew what it would show. I did it this morning, she said. Just temporary. Until we clear things up. Temporary. The word people use when they want something to sound reversible. You made changes without telling me, I said. I didn't feel safe waiting, she replied. That word again. Safe. And I've decided school payments and larger expenses will go through me for now. Her sister nodded approvingly. That makes sense. I kept my hands still, didn't reach for the phone, didn't argue the point in front of an audience that had already chosen a side. We should have discussed it privately, I said. We tried private, she replied. This is where we are now. Her mother stood, signaling the conversation was over. We all want what's best for the child, she said. Everyone agreed with that. It was the easiest thing to agree on. I stood as well, thanked them for having me, picked up my coat. At the door, her brother clapped a hand on my shoulder. Just be straight, man, he said. It'll work out. I nodded and stepped outside. In the car, I sat without starting the engine. Not stunned, not shaking, just aware. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It was action. Lines crossed without discussion. Authority assumed. Back home, I logged into the accounts again, verified what had changed. Not everything. Just enough to remind me who was now considered provisional. Dinner waited in the fridge. I reheated it, ate slowly, and checked my calendar for the week ahead. Meetings, a school conference, a lunch I'd already committed to. Life kept moving. I opened my laptop and added another document to the folder I'd been building, naming it carefully, then closed the computer when footsteps sounded in the hallway and her voice carried from the other room, already mid-conversation with someone who didn't need my side of the story. Chương 5. Thông tin bị che giấu. A message came in while I was reviewing a spreadsheet at work. Not from family, not from her. It was from an old acquaintance I hadn't spoken to in years. We'd crossed paths briefly during a compliance audit a long time ago. Smart, careful with words. You didn't hear this from me, the text read, but your name came up in a consultation last week. I stared at the screen. Consultation where? I typed back. Several minutes passed. Family law, financial disclosure questions, preventive planning. The office around me faded into background noise. Phones rang. Someone laughed down the hall. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, then lowered. What exactly was said? That you might be hiding assets, that there was concern about future instability. Nothing filed yet. Just groundwork. Groundwork. The word explained a lot. I didn't respond right away. Closed the spreadsheet. Took a walk outside, circled the building once, then sat back down. Breathing stayed steady. The body has a way of handling shock quietly when the mind needs time to catch up. Pieces started aligning without effort. The sudden interest in account access. The public conversation with her family. The questions framed like concern but aimed like probes. The way she'd stopped asking and started deciding. This wasn't confusion. It was preparation. Later that afternoon, I called someone I trusted not to dramatize things. An attorney I'd met years ago through work. We hadn't spoken since, but he picked up on the second ring. Talk to me, he said. I laid it out. Facts only. Timelines. Changes made without consent. Conversations overheard. The consultation I just learned about. He listened without interrupting. This isn't a marriage issue anymore, he said once I finished. It's a reputation issue. I leaned back in my chair. Go on. She's building a narrative, one where you're financially opaque and therefore untrustworthy. If that sticks, everything else becomes easier for her. What should I do? Stop assuming this will resolve itself, and stop thinking silence makes you look noble. It just makes you convenient. The phrasing landed hard because it echoed something I'd already been circling. Document everything, he continued. Keep communication written where possible. Don't confront her emotionally. Not yet. And if she files, then you're ready. I thanked him and hung up. That evening, the house felt different again. Not emptier, more managed. She was on the phone when I walked in. Didn't lower her voice this time. No, not yet, she said. I just want to be prepared. I can't afford surprises. She glanced at me briefly, then turned away. Dinner passed with minimal exchange. She talked about logistics, schedules, who would handle pickup later in the week. The tone suggested a future where my role was optional. At one point, she said something that unlocked an old memory. You've always needed control, she said, even before we got married. I looked up. What do you mean? She shrugged. You like being the one who decides, who holds everything together. The words hit a nerve I hadn't examined in years. I grew up watching things fall apart when no one took responsibility. Bills missed, promises broken, adults waiting for someone else to step in. I'd learned early that stability didn't arrive unless you built it yourself. That instinct had followed me into every relationship, including this one. But control wasn't what I wanted. Predictability was. Safety. Somewhere along the way, that distinction had been rewritten for me. Later that night, after she went to bed, I sat at the table with my laptop open and my phone beside it. Messages from her relatives had multiplied. Subtle offers of help, advice I hadn't asked for, questions framed as concern but clearly informed by a version of events I hadn't told. I didn't reply to most of them. Instead, I kept organizing. Emails saved, bank statements exported, notes dated and labeled, not obsessively, deliberately. Around midnight, a notification popped up. A calendar invite I hadn't been included in earlier. Meeting with financial advisor. Her name only. I declined the invite without comment. The next day, I noticed she'd begun using language carefully around others. We're figuring things out. I just need to protect myself. He's under a lot of stress. Each sentence carried just enough truth to sound reasonable. None of them included me. At work, I remained steady. Projects moved forward. Deadlines met. No visible cracks. But internally, the question sharpened. Was I going to keep choosing a version of peace that required me to disappear? Or was I willing to let the structure I'd built withstand tension without collapsing? That evening, after putting my kid to bed, I stood in the doorway longer than usual, watching them breathe, reminding myself what actually mattered. Then I walked back down the hall, opened the folder on my computer one more time, and added a new document, titled with the date and a single word. Options. I didn't fill it in yet. I just left the cursor blinking there, steady and patient, while voices carried faintly from the other room, and I weighed how much longer pretending felt safer than deciding. Mornings became quieter, not peaceful, just stripped down to what was necessary. Wake up, get dressed, pack lunch, drive, talk only when something required an answer. That reduction helped. Fewer words meant fewer chances to be twisted later. At work, I requested copies of documents I'd reviewed years ago. Nothing unusual, just records tied to projects I'd overseen, approvals I'd signed, audits that had cleared without issue. Each file went into a folder with a date, then into another folder that tracked context. The habit came naturally. Order had always been how I kept my footing. Lunch hours stopped being social. I walked instead, sometimes downtown, sometimes nowhere in particular. On one of those walks, I stepped into a building I'd passed hundreds of times without entering. The law office sat above a coffee shop. No sign outside that would catch attention. That mattered. The attorney didn't waste time. You've done nothing wrong so far, he said, flipping through the pages I'd brought. But timing matters, and tone matters. Explain. You don't confront, you prepare. You let facts speak before emotions have a chance to distort them. That aligned with everything I already believed. We met twice more that week. Always brief, always quiet. Different entrances, different times. No paper trail beyond invoices addressed to me alone. Back home, I adjusted how I communicated. Short responses, clear boundaries. If a request came without context, I asked for clarification. If a decision had already been made, I noted it without objection. We're changing the pickup schedule next month, she said one night. Put it in writing, I replied, so I don't miss anything. She looked at me longer than usual. "Why are you being like this?" "Consistent," I said. She didn't press. Not yet. Messages started arriving from unfamiliar numbers, some framed as concern. Heard things were stressful. "Let me know if you need support." Others less subtle. "You should think about what's best for everyone and not complicate things." I saved them. Didn't reply. One evening, while clearing old emails, I noticed an alert from a shared cloud account. Access logs showed files opened late at night, folders I hadn't touched in months. I changed passwords, not aggressively, methodically, one at a time. No announcement followed, no argument, just a shift. A few days later, she asked why a file wouldn't open. "Probably a sync issue," I said. "I'll look at it." I didn't. The change registered in her posture more than her words. Less ease, more watchfulness. Conversations took on an edge, like every sentence carried a secondary purpose. At the grocery store one night, I noticed a car idling longer than necessary 2 spaces over. Same model I'd seen earlier that week near my office. Could have been coincidence, could have been nothing. I noted the plate number anyway. That night, my phone buzzed with a message that didn't bother hiding its intent. "You don't want this to get ugly." No name attached. I took a screenshot, backed it up, then deleted the message thread from the phone itself. Sleep came easily, despite it all, or maybe because of it. Once the mind commits to a direction, it stops circling. Days passed, then weeks. I kept showing up for my kid, school events, practices, parent-teacher conferences. When asked who would be responsible for what, I answered clearly, calmly. "That's on me. Send it to my email." No defensiveness, no justification. At work, I delegated more, pulled back from informal favors. My role tightened into something leaner, more defined. Colleagues noticed, but didn't question it. Competence still spoke louder than rumor. At home, she grew quieter, less phone chatter, more time alone. When she did speak, it was measured. "You've changed," she said one evening. "Things are different," I replied. She studied my face as if searching for something familiar. Whatever she expected didn't surface. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table with the laptop open. The folder had grown. Documents stacked neatly, dates aligned. A timeline took shape without effort. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. What replaced it was clarity, the kind that sharpens focus instead of burning it. From the living room, her voice carried again, lower than before. Careful. "I think he knows something." A pause. "I'm not sure how much." I closed the laptop softly, stood, and walked down the hall to check on my kid. Adjusted the blanket, smoothed the edge, listened to steady breathing. Back in the kitchen, I picked up my phone and added one more note to the growing list. Not urgent, not dramatic, just another piece in place. Outside, a car passed slowly. Didn't stop, didn't return. I turned off the kitchen light, leaving the table clear except for the laptop, still open where I'd left it, cursor resting at the end of a line I hadn't finished writing yet. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, slipped between grocery ads and a utility bill. Plain, official enough to slow my hand. I opened it standing at the counter, read the first paragraph once, then again. A formal notice, intent to file, allegations framed carefully, without accusations loud enough to invite immediate defense. Concerns about financial transparency, requests for temporary arrangements, language designed to sound reasonable. My phone buzzed before I finished reading, a message from her sister. "We didn't want it to come to this. Please don't make it harder than it needs to be." I folded the letter neatly and set it down. At work, the ripple hit faster than I expected. A meeting I'd been scheduled to lead was reassigned, not canceled, just moved to someone else's calendar. A colleague avoided eye contact when I asked about it. "It's temporary," he said. "HR thought it might be better this way." Better for whom wasn't clarified. By noon, the story had found its shape. Not dramatic, controlled. The kind that doesn't accuse outright but leaves room for suspicion to do the work. A few people checked in, others kept their distance. I kept my voice even. Finished what I could, packed up earlier than usual. Outside, the sky threatened rain without committing. I sat in the car for a minute before driving, letting the silence stretch until it stopped feeling sharp. At home, she was already there. Papers spread across the table, her posture calm, prepared. "We need to talk," she said. I set my bag down. "You've already started," I replied. She didn't deny it. This isn't an attack, it's protection. From what? From uncertainty. She slid a document toward me, a proposal, temporary custody adjustments, financial oversight, language that suggested fairness while tightening control. I thought we agreed to slow down, I said. Things changed, because you decided they did. She inhaled, then exhaled through her nose. You're not being realistic. The phrase sounded familiar. I'd heard it before, years ago, from my father, standing in a half-empty apartment, telling me why he was leaving. I felt that old pull then, the instinct to absorb blame to keep things from breaking. The urge to say, fine, let's just get through this. It took effort not to fall into it. I need time to review this, I said. Her jaw tightened. You've had time. Not like this. She stood. If you don't cooperate, this gets harder. For everyone. That was the moment the room shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough to reveal what had been underneath all along. Including our kid? I asked. She didn't answer right away. I'm doing what I have to do. She gathered the papers, walked past me, and closed the bedroom door. My phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from a cousin. Heard things are serious. Let me know if you need a place to stay. I set the phone face down. Later that evening, my kid asked why voices had been louder lately. I kept my answer simple. Adults are figuring things out. Are you okay? They asked. I smiled. I will be. That was the first lie I'd told that day. After bedtime, I sat alone at the table. The folder on my laptop felt heavier than it had the night before. Not because it lacked anything, but because what it contained was about to be tested. I called the attorney. They moved faster than I expected, I said. That's common, he replied. Pressure creates mistakes. They're isolating me. Then don't stay isolated. I ended the call and stared at the wall longer than necessary. The edges of the room blurred slightly. Not panic. Fatigue. This was the point I'd spent my life avoiding. The place where holding things together meant letting them pull you apart. I thought about my childhood. The nights I listened to arguments through thin walls. The promises made quietly the morning after. The way silence had been mistaken for strength. I stood and paced the length of the kitchen. Stopped at the sink. Ran water over my hands without needing to. In the other room, I heard her on the phone again. He's not cooperating, she said. I don't know what else to do. A pause. I can't wait forever. Something settled then. Not anger. Resolve without ceremony. I walked back to the table, opened the laptop, and began drafting a response. Not emotional, not defensive. Clear. Specific. Anchored to facts already documented. Midway through, a notification appeared. Another message from an unknown number. Last chance to make this easy. I didn't reply. Didn't save it either. Just noted the time. When the draft was finished, I attached supporting documents, reread everything once, and scheduled the email to send the following morning. I shut the laptop gently. The house was quiet again. Not peaceful, just waiting. I checked on my kid once more, adjusted the door so it stayed open a crack, then returned to the living room, sat on the couch without turning on the TV, let the night pass without filling it. At some point, she emerged from the bedroom, walked past without speaking, and headed for the kitchen. Cabinets opened, closed. I remained where I was, hands resting on my knees, breathing steady, aware that staying silent now would cost more than standing up ever had. The call came while I was driving back from work. An unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, then answered anyway. Is this you? The voice asked. It is. A pause, then a breath taken carefully. I don't know how involved I should be, but I think you deserve to hear this from someone who isn't trying to control the story. She introduced herself as a paralegal, not mine, not officially hers either. Someone who'd been present in rooms where my name had been discussed more than once. I can't give you documents, she said, but I can tell you what questions were asked, and why. Traffic slowed. I pulled into a side street and parked. Go on. The concern wasn't whether you hid money. It was whether there was a way to frame your structure as concealment. The strategy depended on ambiguity, not proof. That distinction mattered. Who pushed for that angle? I asked. Another pause. Your wife, repeatedly. She explained without embellishment. Consultations framed as hypothetical. Requests to explore worst-case leverage. A focus on perception rather than facts. The goal wasn't clarity, it was advantage. She wanted to know how quickly temporary measures could become permanent. the paralegal added, especially if you stayed cooperative. Cooperative. The word made everything click. Thank you for telling me, I said. Be careful, she replied. She's already assuming you won't fight back. The call ended. I stayed parked for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. No rush of triumph, just alignment. Every odd moment, every half-truth, every pressure point finally connected into a single shape. At home, she was on her laptop. Didn't look up when I walked in. I need a copy of last month's statements, she said. Which ones? I asked. All of them. You already have access to most. Not anymore. I nodded and walked past her without responding. Not avoidance, just timing. In my office, I opened the folder again, reviewed the timeline, compared dates. The consultation I'd just learned about lined up precisely with the shift in her behavior. The family meeting, the account changes, the controlled narrative. One detail stood out now that I knew where to look. A transfer request she'd initiated weeks earlier but never completed. It sat frozen, waiting for a trigger that hadn't come. I made a note. Later that evening, she approached me in the kitchen. You've been distant, she said. I've been listening. She scoffed. To who? To what's actually being said. Her expression tightened, then smoothed over. You're imagining things. Possibly. This paranoia isn't helping. Neither is pretending nothing's happening. She crossed her arms. You're acting like I'm the enemy. I'm acting like someone who's paying attention. Silence stretched between us, not heavy, evaluative. If you push this, she said, you lose control completely. Control over what? Over how this ends. I didn't answer. That night, I received an email forwarded accidentally, not meant for me. A short exchange between her and an advisor, discussing expected compliance and resistance scenarios. My name reduced to a variable. She realized the mistake minutes later. Another message followed quickly. Please delete that. Wrong recipient. I didn't respond. Instead, I saved it. Cross-referenced the language. Noted how often cooperation appeared next to temporary. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. Made coffee. Asked about my schedule. Mentioned a school event later in the week. I answered politely. Briefly. At work, I sent a message to my attorney with an attachment and a single sentence. This completes the picture. His reply came within the hour. Yes, it does. That afternoon, I stopped by the courthouse on my lunch break, not to file anything, just to observe, to understand the rhythm of the place, how things moved when no one was performing for an audience. Back in the car, I felt lighter than I had in weeks, not relieved, grounded. When I got home, she was already there, pacing while on the phone. He's being difficult now, she said. I don't know why he's suddenly changing. She saw me and stopped talking, ended the call. We need to resolve this, she said. We will. Soon. On my timeline. Her eyes searched my face, trying to locate hesitation. She didn't find it. What are you planning? She asked. I'm planning to be accurate. She laughed softly. Accuracy doesn't win these things. It does when it's complete. That night, after my kid went to bed, I returned to the table and laid out documents in order. Not everything, just enough to see the arc clearly. There it was, the weak point. Not money, not custody, assumption. She'd built everything on the belief that I would keep absorbing pressure to preserve calm, that I'd trade truth for quiet, that I'd remain predictable. I gathered the papers, slid them back into the folder, and closed it. No rush, no hesitation. In the other room, cabinets opened and shut. Water ran. A phone vibrated on the counter. I stood, carried the folder to my bag, and set it by the door, already thinking through the conversation that was coming next, not as a confrontation, but as a correction that would finally be spoken out loud. She chose the setting this time. A conference room at her attorney's office. Neutral ground, she'd called it. Controlled. Clean. I arrived 10 minutes early, not to make a point, just to avoid rushing. The folder stayed in my bag, untouched. She walked in with confidence she'd practiced. Hair neat, expression calm. A version of herself built for credibility. You look tired, she said, taking a seat. I slept fine. Her attorney nodded politely. Mine did the same. Introductions finished, doors closed. She started talking first. "We don't need to make this ugly," she said. "I'm still willing to be reasonable." "Reasonable how?" I asked. "You cooperate. We move forward quietly. No accusations, no damage." She leaned back, hands folded. "If you fight this, people will start asking questions you don't want answered." There it was, the final card. I didn't respond right away, opened my bag instead, took out the folder and placed it on the table, still closed. "You've been asking questions for weeks," I said. "Let's be specific." Her attorney shifted slightly. "My client has concerns about transparency," she said. "I know." I opened the folder and slid the first document across the table. "This is a timeline of account activity, dates, access logs, changes made without my consent." Her eyes flicked down, just for a second. "That proves nothing," she said. "It proves sequence." The next document followed. "This is the email chain discussing expected compliance. You were copied. I was not." Her attorney reached for it, read, looked up. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "I was included by mistake." Silence settled briefly. Not dramatic, just enough. She leaned forward. "You're twisting things. This is about safety." "Then explain this." I placed the transfer request on the table, the one she'd initiated and never completed. "You prepared to move funds before any filing, before any discussion. Why?" Her mouth opened, then closed. "That was precautionary." "Against what?" She glanced at her attorney, then back at me. "Against instability." I nodded once. "Now this." I slid the final item forward. A summary of the consultation dates matched against behavior shifts, family meeting, account restrictions, custody suggestions. "You didn't want clarity," I said. "You wanted leverage." Her voice sharpened. "You're accusing me now?" "No. I'm describing what happened." She pushed back from the table. "You think this makes you look good? Bringing paperwork like a weapon?" "It's not a weapon. It's context." Her attorney cleared her throat. "We should take a moment," she said. "There's no need," I replied. I looked at my wife directly. "You assumed I'd stay quiet, that I'd keep absorbing pressure so things stayed comfortable for everyone else." Her jaw tightened. "You've always needed to be the hero." "No," I said. "I needed stability. You use that." She shook her head. "You're paranoid. You're overreacting." "Then why did you frame everything as temporary while working to make it permanent?" She didn't answer. Her attorney spoke again. "If this proceeds to court, there will be scrutiny on both sides." "That's fine." The room shifted then, not because of anger, because the script she'd written no longer applied. She tried once more. "Think about our kid," she said. "I am." "Then stop this." Stopping would mean agreeing to a story that isn't true. Her eyes searched my face, looking for the hesitation she'd counted on. It wasn't there. "If you keep going," she said quietly, "you lose access. You lose standing." "I lose convenience," I said, "not truth." I closed the folder and slid it back into my bag. "This conversation is over." Her attorney blinked. "Excuse me?" "I'll respond through counsel from here on." I stood, didn't rush, didn't linger. She rose too. "You don't get to just walk away." "I do." Her voice followed me to the door. "You think you won something?" I paused with my hand on the handle. "I think things are clear now." Outside, the hallway felt ordinary. Carpet worn, fluorescent hum, people passing without interest. I walked past them all. In the car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine, not to savor anything, just to breathe. A message buzzed on my phone, from her. "You didn't have to do this." I didn't reply. I drove home, picked up my kid from practice, listened to them talk about a drill they'd finally gotten right, nodded, asked questions, stayed present. That evening, after homework and dinner, I packed a small bag, essentials only. She watched from the doorway. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Out." "For how long?" "I'll let you know through the proper channels." She scoffed. "You're making a mistake." I zipped the bag and lifted it from the bed. "I'm correcting one." I walked past her, past the life I'd held together longer than it had held me, and stepped outside without slamming the door, already focused on the next practical thing that needed doing. The apartment was smaller than the house I'd left, but it worked. A couch, a table, a spare room for weekends. I unpacked only what I needed and stacked the rest in a corner without labeling the boxes. Nothing about the space asked me to explain myself. Morning settled into a new rhythm. Coffee, a quick check of messages, a drive that didn't feel rushed. I stopped filling gaps with excuses. When questions came, I answered them plainly or not at all. Paperwork moved the way it does when there's no drama left to feed it. Dates, deadlines, signatures. My attorney handled communication. I read everything before approving it. No edits driven by anger. No concessions offered to soften someone else's discomfort. The consequences arrived quietly for her. Temporary measures turned permanent where they were meant to. Accounts were audited. Statements compared. The story she'd built collapsed under its own weight. Not because I attacked it, but because it couldn't stand up to light. Family members adjusted. Some reached out, unsure what tone to take. "We didn't know the whole picture," one of them said. "You know enough now," I replied. That ended those conversations without bitterness. There was no need to collect apologies. At work, my role stabilized again. Projects resumed under my name. A manager asked if I wanted to explain the gap. "I handled a personal matter," I said. That was accepted. Competence doesn't need a narrative. With my kid, things were simpler than I'd feared. Schedules lived on a shared calendar. Pickups happened on time. Dinners stayed ordinary. We talked about school, friends, plans for summer. When questions edged toward the bigger change, I kept answers grounded. "Adults make choices," I said. "We still show up." That seemed to be enough. One afternoon, I received a message from her, the first direct one in weeks. "We should talk." I read it once, then forwarded it to my attorney without comment. Another message followed. "I'm not trying to fight anymore." I didn't respond. Silence wasn't punishment, it was alignment. Every reply I didn't send kept the boundary intact. Later, an update came through counsel. The terms finalized, the last loose end tied. No victory language, no condemnation, just resolution. That night, I cooked for myself and ate at the table without checking my phone. The habit felt new, like standing straight after years of leaning. I thought about the version of myself that believed endurance was the same as integrity. How often I'd confused taking responsibility with absorbing blame. How easy it had been for others to step over lines I never drew. That weakness wasn't something to punish, it was something to correct. I went through the remaining boxes and decided what stayed. Clothes I never wore went into a donation bag. Old paperwork fed the shredder. A framed photo from years ago landed face down in a drawer, not out of spite, just because it didn't belong on the wall anymore. A call came from my attorney with a final confirmation. "Everything's settled," he said. "No further action required." "Thank you. You did this the right way." I ended the call and washed the dishes, letting the water run only as long as it needed to. The sink emptied, the counter cleared. Later, I sat on the couch and opened a book I'd been meaning to finish. Read a few pages, set it aside, checked the calendar for the week ahead, and added a note about a school event I didn't want to miss. Outside, traffic moved. Somewhere, phones rang. Other lives continued at their own pace. I turned off the lamp and stood, thinking about the drive in the morning, the pickup later in the week, the quiet work of building something that didn't require me to disappear to survive. The door locked with a soft click as I stepped into the hallway to take the trash out, carrying only what I no longer needed, leaving the rest where it finally made sense.